Good morning. Welcome to Around the Valuation World. The most exciting 50 minutes, you can tell I'm excited, the most exciting 50 minutes in business valuation in Las Vegas. That's right. Let me hear that again. Woo! It's the last day. See, I wore my Vegas shirt. How about that? That's right. At least so far, our slides, what's going? Right, okay, are they up there? Very good. They weren't working. We have a monitor here, and it doesn't always play along. So thank you all for getting up early once again. I always like the last day. It's a little smaller show, a little more intimate. I don't know about you all, but by this point, I'm starting to relax about doing this. So I think that helps too. I'm very pleased to have Ed Mofred up here.
It's my pleasure.
Janae Castell and Michael Gregory. We're going to cover the first couple summaries of presentations yesterday. Then we're going to switch off, do a couple more. And then we're going to end with something I know all of you find really exciting, computer valuation technology. I can't tell you, other than the stuff does help me stay in business tremendously. So why don't we, at this point, get started with the best of engagement letters. Glenn Block, I did the presentation. I attended part of his presentation. It was really, really on point. Why don't we roll the tape?
Once again, good afternoon. This is Ed Mofred, CPA of Around the Valuation World of the bigger organization NACVA. This afternoon, this very hot afternoon in Vegas, we have the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Glenn Block. He flew here all the way from Allentown, Pennsylvania, of the firm Block and Aldinger CPAs, to be with us. And he just availed us of his very informative presentation, best of the best of engagement letters. Engagement letters, in fact, is a hot topic in our profession, in our community. Our insurance companies require it. Our standards, professional standards require it. And so it's a very essential topic. A lot of people don't think about it right away, but he was here to enlighten us about it. So Glenn, let me ask you, why is an engagement letter so crucially important?
Well, Ed, thank you very much, and thank you for the kind introduction. I am passionate about engagement letters. Engagement letters are critical in this profession. We as valuation experts are so relying on our expertise and knowledge to be able to create good quality reports that we write. We sometimes overlook the fact that having an engagement letter to back that report is critical. If you write an evaluation report or any kind of report, damages report, and it's not backed up properly with an engagement letter, you could have a very bad day in court, and you could even have a very bad career if your report fails. So it's very important to ensure that the language that's contained in your engagement letter is the best language to protect you and your firm from possible lawsuit.
Oh, okay. And in your years of experience, what do you experience to be the most case scenario? Do clients or the attorneys come to engage you?
That's a great question, and it depends. Primarily, the best what we seek is the attorney to try to sign the engagement letter. And there's a reason for that. If we have an attorney sign the engagement letter, we protect what could potentially be client-attorney privilege. Now, that's only in a case where we're acting as a consultant. I like to have the lawyer sign the letter where possible. I usually put a clause in the letter if the attorney is uncomfortable signing the letter, stating that the client is responsible for the fee arrangement. And that way there, if I list in the engagement letter that the lawyer is responsible, I retain the attorney-client privilege as long as I'm a consultant. And if we switch to the part where I would have to be an expert witness, then in that scenario, of course, we lose the client attorney privilege, but nevertheless, it gives us the best of all possibilities in case the case settles early on before we have to go to court.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So, Ed, do you have any further thoughts, having seen the presentation?
Yes, engagement letters is a neglected part of our profession. A lot of younger people, when they start off, they don't appreciate or realize the importance of it. They go on a handshake, and when the deal goes bad, they really have nothing to fall back on. Engagement letter is there to protect you, basically, and the client. And if in cases where attorneys are involved, even if the client is not thinking about it, the attorney certainly is, and it's just as crucial as can be. I've known people who really got in trouble. I said this, the client said no, I said that, when things went sour, and there was no, just he said.
Yeah, I know. I come from I have two different experiences that influence my thought on engagement letters. One, I grew up in a family of general contractors, and believe me, we had contracts. And your engagement letter, while hopefully it's not 75 pages long, it's your contract. Limit your liability. We're given in many cases, especially if you're like me and you're doing smaller businesses, we're not being given audited financial information. We're not always being given all the facts. Protect yourself to the fullest extent you can. Make sure you don't, do limit consequential damages. I try to limit it down to, this changed, sorry. I try to limit it down to my fee. I've been told, that probably wouldn't be enforceable, but you want to stay away from consequential. That's when, just things really explode. The other thing, in a world of fixed fees, while if I'm doing an opinion of value, I have to do all the work. If I'm doing fixed fee and perhaps the financials are not even in reasonable shape for what I'm doing, I can put a scope of work in there and I don't have to have it all in my base price. I'm still required to do all the work to give an opinion. I can't get out of that. But I can have an adjustment on my fixed fee. And I do explain to people it's in very limited cases, and at least for me, it has been in limited cases. But I had one of those where, the one company turned out to be two companies, and both of the companies did unlimited transfers back and forth with almost no documentation. That was a little change order. So.
And I have personally learned to not to make my engagement letter set in stone. Things change, as Greg just mentioned. A lot of times clients don't reveal all that there is to know at the beginning. Then when we get into the engagement, there's a whole side to it that we didn't even know about. And it turns out to be a time pit or a money pit. So I always leave enough flexibility in the language of my engagement letters to ask for further retainers or fees if I need to.
Absolutely. Why don't we move on to the next one, which was how to properly perform and document a fair value engagement. Again, I attended Nathan's and it was very, very good. Why don't we, I say roll the tape, I guess you push the button and the electrons move.
Hi, I'm Janae Castell, one of the correspondents with the Around the Valuation World show, and I'm here with Nathan DiNatale, who just finished a segment on properly documenting and performing valuation engagements for fair value. So Nathan, one of the things that you spoke about was prospective financial information. Now, we've had some controversy in prior conferences about prospective financial information and running projections. Is it appropriate in the fair value assignments to take management's projections and adjust them or change them or reject them, or do we have to accept them at face value?
I would say you don't always have to accept them at face value. It's more important that they are realistic forecasts. For example, do they tie into industry very well? Are industry expectations matching what their expectations are? What about other companies in the market? Do they look at other companies and informing those? The other issue is how frequently does management prepare forecasts? If they're only preparing them for your fair value engagement, chances are they're not very good at performing those. So it's good to understand what their experience is and then work from there to make sure that they appear reasonable. And all of our work is heavily based on those forecasts. So it's a good idea to make sure they look sound.
All right. So if they've missed projections for 10 years straight, you're okay. It's not a problem to go ahead and adjust those to something that's a little bit more
I would hope
reasonable.
they wouldn't miss them for 10 years. I usually look at them for 1 year, kind of take them based on my analysis for face value. But if next year they're missing them a little bit, we may say, let's adjust these a little bit. Let's try and figure out where we should be. And if the following year they miss them again, at that point, the client really doesn't know how to forecast. And then we have to actually start having a little more input into making them reasonable.
Okay, that sounds good. Now, tell me about something that sounds like it could be a little embarrassing. You mentioned making sure you have all of the assets of a business, intangible and tangible. What can happen, or how do you make sure that you have all of the assets, that you're not missing something?
Well, I think from the beginning, I think what you want to do is have a really robust discussion with the client about what assets actually exist as of the date of acquisition. And I always encourage to have the auditors on the phone, the audit team, potentially the valuation team. They've been working with that client for years. They've understand the transaction. They know why they acquired the company. They often will know a lot more than you do just going into it. The last thing you want is to get to a draft report and then have somebody say, yes, but we had a big amount of deferred revenue on the books that we need fair valued, and you did not do anything to it.
Sounds like a bad place to be in.
It's a bad place.
All right. Well, hopefully you've never had that experience.
No.
And hopefully we can save our listeners from having that experience also. I appreciate you lending your insights today and joining us here on the show this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Janae?
All right. Yeah, Nathan was great. He's very smart. I don't know how he stays sane working with all the auditors and all the fair value intricacies. There's a lot of weird things that they've done with fair value, especially in recent years. And another thing that he talked about was the different markets that you have to consider, you know, the most likely market available to a company, and also the most advantageous market. So those kind of things are a little bit tricky. You know, I know there are a lot of people out here that specialize in fair value. So, you know, when you get an assignment, especially now with some of the mandatory performance framework, if you've got an engagement and you need some support to be able to do it competently, you know, reach out to guys like Nathan or anybody in your network that you meet, you know, here today or the last couple of days, to make sure that you know what you're doing and you're not going to miss something. You're not going to miss an asset. You're not going to miss a requirement of the fair value standards.
Michael, I think you had a little to say.
I would comment on we spoke on the negative side or the beware side. I'd come back on the positive side and ask for their projections for previous years and see how well they've done. And some firms do really well. And so when you've got those excellent projections and now you're going to do your analysis, you want to give them credit for that. You want to include that in your commentary and make sure that that's going to give you additional credibility back with those auditors that you went back and looked at it. You verified some elements within it, and they've done very well in the past. That gives you credibility with the work that you've done that, and to the company with the auditors that might be reviewing what you have done and they have done.
Fantastic. Thank you. Put it here. Wonderful. I think at this point we're going to swap off a couple correspondents. So thank you so much, Janae and Mike, for getting up early, and Alan Zip and Melissa Gregg. We're going to welcome you. And this is the Greg and Ed show today, really. So there you go. Fantastic. So The next presentation we're going to talk about was opposing experts without standards, what to expect and how to challenge them with Dermot O'Neill. He is one of my go-to people when I'm not quite sure what the standards are, if I'm doing a little bit different twist valuation. A very knowledgeable, good guy. Why don't we roll this one? I think it's just.
Good afternoon. This is Ed Mofrat, CPA, part of the Around the Valuation World with the NACVA. We are here in Las Vegas this afternoon, and I have the good fortune to be interviewing Mr. Dermot O'Neill of Dermot O'Neill Professional Corporation. He flew here all the way from Pennsylvania to be with us and to avail us of his expertise. He just finished presenting on how to oppose experts without standards and how to challenge them. And we want him to extend on that. If there was one takeaway from all this, Dermot, how do you challenge individuals without standards?
Well, the individuals without standards are basically, in my experience, several. First would be CFAs, Certified Financial Analysts. Although they don't have professional valuation standards, they do have ethical standards. The other group that I run into frequently are what generally called academics, which are people with MBAs or PhDs. They have no professional standards for valuation purposes. Others are investment bankers, business brokers, what we call industry experts. A person might be an expert in the restaurant industry or the printing industry and know all about that industry and then think that they can value a business in that industry, which generally happens. Also, we have MAIs, which are members of the member of the Appraisal Institute, which is a real estate designation. And I've run across several situations where, in addition to valuing real estate, they value the business that was situated on the real estate. So those are the ones I've run across. I'm sure there are more that I haven't experienced.
I see. And in your experience, can a CVA successfully challenge an individual without standards?
Yeah, one of the tools that we have in NACVA is our review standards, which came in June of 15, I believe it was. The review standards used by the member to review and challenge the expert report can wind up being very successful. The review standards can be used to write a review report by the member, or it can be used for the member to assist developing cross-examination questions for the attorney.
I see. And based on your experience on doing this, how do courts go about or view a CVA or somebody in our profession interviewing somebody without standards?
Really, there's not too much of a challenge. The courts basically will accept that the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice are generally applicable throughout the country. And if you can show that your NACVA standards and Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, USPAP, agree, then really there's really not an issue with the courts. I've been accepted by the courts, federal courts, state courts, for various business valuation type engagements, and there's never been an issue about the NACVA standards. And I've successfully communicated with courts, one in Jersey particularly, using the USPAP standards, because once you're credentialed, you can use pretty much any standards that work under the facts and circumstances.
Interesting. Ed, what were your further thoughts on it?
Standards are good, but I liken the situation to going to a foreign country. You don't speak the language. There are certain standards of ethics and behavior that is universal, and you're expected to adhere by them. You don't know the laws of that country. It may be totally strange to you. You may end up in a place like Cuba or North Korea or anywhere. But you are able to get along just because of based on common sense, what's right, what's wrong. Everybody knows the difference between truth and untruth. everybody knows the difference between good behavior and bad behavior. So everybody is expected to adhere to those, as long as the CFA or the PhD or investment banker is honest and deals with integrity and professional integrity and just common sense. You should be able to communicate and get the work done.
Great. I find integrity is kind of like a rubber band with some people, but I don't know that that's a valuation, at least for this morning. Maybe we should do a course on that one day.
But I think that the courts are also kind of, they see all these letters and they say, yeah, okay, well, you're smart and you're smart and you're smart and everybody's smart. And you start to say that they're not abiding by, what your standards are, but they don't have standards. I think that some of that conversation gets lost in the court because they're still like, well, you both seem like smart people. You both seem like you know what you're talking about. So I think that only when it's really a big issue, like if you're doing a subsequent event and it specifically says in the AICPA that you can't do, like bringing up those types of facts, I think are helpful. But sometimes it's hard to really nail somebody when it's like a he said, she said kind of thing.
Very good. All right. Why don't we roll on to how you can help me? The divorce lawyer, Randy Kessler, which we interviewed last year on the show. And Randy is a very personable trial attorney. So he gets 5 minutes this morning instead of 3.
Hi, I'm Melissa Gregg with Around the Valuation World. I'm here with Randy Kessler, who did a great presentation called How You Can Help Me, the Divorce Lawyer. He's very well known in the divorce community, but maybe you can give us a little bit more information about you and your firm in Atlanta.
So we've got a firm of about 30 people, 12 lawyers in Atlanta. I was chair of the family law section of the American Bar, and I lecture a lot for the NBA Players Association, NFL Players Association. So I get asked to represent people in other states every now and then, unlike most divorce lawyers. And most importantly, is that I've done a lot of work with NACVA, and I really enjoy coming out here because I'm getting to learn stuff that a lot of lawyers don't know. So it's fun. I like to write, I like to teach, but being with you guys really helps me progress as a lawyer. That's my hidden secret for why I like to come out here.
Well, and I think it's helpful for us as experts to get a perspective from an attorney's viewpoint about what we can do better, how we can excel in the field. What would you say would be the top 3 pieces of advice that you would say to an expert doing valuations in divorce?
All right, so I don't know if the word is don't overestimate or underestimate, but don't presume the lawyer is as smart as you might think the lawyer is, or as smart as the lawyer might think he or she is. Dumb it down, make it simple, make it easy for us. All we want is for you to come into court with your credibility and to have on a poster board or the front of a report your valuation. The rest is easy. Let me tell you about her credentials, Judge. Let me tell you about how much work she did. Let her tell you about how much work she did. Just make it simple so that we can understand it, and make sure you meet with lawyers. I mean, this is the biggest thing I talked about in my program was, lawyers are thinking about how to prepare their client for trial and make sure they're not nervous, how to prepare the client's mother when she's on the witness stand, how to make sure my staff knows what documents I need. You're expert witnesses. Now, I know expert means you're an expert at valuation, but the public thinks and lawyers think you're an expert witness. So you know how to be a witness. So you'll know what to say. Well, guess what? If I don't know everything you're going to say before you say it, I might learn about my case in a bad way once you're on the witness stand, and then it's too late. So make sure you force a meeting with the lawyers before you have to testify in deposition or trial would be my number 1 tip.
Well, and I think from the expert's perspective, when I'm in a meeting with a client and an attorney, there's a lot of different ways. You don't have to say, oh, Randy, did you know this? No. Instead, you can say, I know Randy already knows this, but I'm talking to the client and I'm sorry if we're going through this again. But sometimes if the attorney doesn't know it, that's the way you can get the information to them too.
1,000%. I also mentioned that in my presentation, which is if you say something smart to the client, you're not going to make me look bad because I brought you into the case.
Right.
See, that's why I brought her into the case. She found something that I didn't think to find. If I knew everything she knew, then we wouldn't need her. I could figure out how much your business is worth. I don't know that. That's why we have her. Be smart, figure it out, and explain it to the, you might be talking to the lawyer by looking at the client and saying, Now, what we really do is we use this methodology and we apply this discount. So therefore, your business is only worth X. I'm listening, I'm learning, but of course, you're right. Don't make me feel foolish in front of the client. But again, simplify it, simplify it, simplify it. You guys know so much more than the average lawyer doing divorce work. Just, the bare bones, what's it worth? Can you convince a judge of that?
Well, and you said something really simple, which is meet with the client at the beginning. And I think that part of that is that there are discussions about costs and what we're going to do and scope of the project that really, if you're having all those conversations with the attorney and the client's just like, you guys just decided what to do. Whereas if you get that client involved and say, okay, let's do these steps and then revisit, I think then they know they're part of the team.
And there's a psychological component too. Now, I don't know that every lawyer is going to feel like this, but I'm very happy if the forensic person earns more money than I earn in the case, because they're the ones hand-holding then and doing a lot of the work. But I think it's really important that if a client talks to an accountant, a numbers person, they're going to focus on how they will be financially when the case is over. If they're talking to me, they're bad-mouthing, maligning, vindicating themselves. They want to talk about all the bad stuff their spouse did and why they should be vindicated in front of a judge, which doesn't help them in the long run. If they're talking to the forensic person, the valuation expert, they're thinking, how much money will I have? How long will it last? What's the tax effect? Those are the questions that advance them in their life. And so I'd rather them talk to you all more than they talk to me.
Yeah, it was a great presentation. I really appreciate you coming to the conference. And if Randy looks familiar, you might need to Google him because he represents a lot of famous people. So thank you. It's Around the Valuation World. Randy, any parting remarks?
No, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a great organization, a great group, and I'm just flattered to be invited and happy to come back anytime.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you.
Good to have a disclaimer there, right? Even if it's quick. Melissa?
Oh, he's a fascinating person, just in the fact that he represents a lot of famous people. I thought was interesting, and I did recognize him because he does some work on Bravo. So I don't know if you guys have any of those. Passion about the housewives, but he does represent quite a few. But I thought it was interesting. Can I just get like a show of hands of anybody who is actively testifying in court? Not too many. Anybody want to get into it and want to get their first court case? So I think the other biggest piece of advice that I thought was really helpful, because he says, people ask me all the time, if I've never testified, would you still hire me? And he said, yes, but what I would want you to do, and Georgia is a little bit different. They can do jury trials for divorce. But he said you need to go and you need to watch other people testify. And I think that that's way back whenever I started, we would go to these big cases and watch some of the experts testify, because the reality is you don't have to learn all these lessons on the stand. Another thing is a lot of larger law firms, larger divorce firms in particular, but a lot of other firms do these they train up their younger lawyers with mock trials. And if you get connected with some of these law firms, you can actually be the expert in the mock trial. And it gets you some experience, kind of gets you like those nerves, nervous and everything, because you want to perform, because they're all watching, right? And then they'll hire you going forward. And then NACVA also has a new thing that we're doing, which is getting kind of pro bono people interested in pro bono work. So where you would offer your services and get experience. So there's lots of ways to get. I think it's very lucrative and very fun, but not everybody agrees with that.
If somebody's working pro bono, do you trust them to your case?
Well, I think that what they're trying to do is get the experience. And I'll have to be honest with you, doing a lot of litigation, you're going to get, I work with a ton of attorneys and we do big, high net worth cases. And then they will call and say, I have a case. I know you're going to take a bath in it, but these people don't have a lot of money. They need your services, And in my version of pro bono, that's still my reputation. I'm still going to do the best work I can, but I know that we have to be more efficient and we can't do everything. Got to be a narrow scope. We'll come in, but a lot of this is for settlement. So I think he even said in his presentation, and I do this with a lot of people, offer a lower fee, 1,500, 2,000, something to come in and say, you know, I'll spend 5 hours looking at the financials and tell you whether there's an issue or not. Because in some cases, if the company's not worth more than the 1,500 or 10,000 or 15,000, it's not going to be worth it for them to pay you to value it. But an attorney always needs an expert to tell them whether there is an issue or not. They can't really go into settlement just saying that asset's worth nothing. They need somebody to really tell them, or else it's malpractice in some cases. And so I'll come in and just spend a couple hours and say, you know, you really do have something of value here, or, you know, it's net book value is 10 grand, like go and try to settle this. But I won't issue an opinion on it, but I'm giving them some idea of where to go. They might settle it for 15 or 20,000.
Wonderful. Alan, I'm sure you have something to say
Well,
doing trial work.
For sure.
You know, the trial people speak so much more fluid and better up here right from the start.
I interviewed Randy for the Around the Valuation World last year, and we talked a good deal about how can his advice help us as appraisers. And to add an additional item that that is important is the standard of value in divorce varies from state to state. And the personal goodwill issue that he identified as being very significant is something that we need to know what is the rule in the state where we're practicing. Under federal rules, for instance, personal goodwill is not an asset of the corporation. However, in divorce, personal goodwill may very well be a marital asset that needs to be valued in the marital estate. So Randy was pointing out that we as appraisers have to understand what is the law in the state with regard to the asset and the valuation methods and models that state law requires for divorce. And this is a fascinating area. I do a great deal of it, and it's a lot of fun. And all the things that were stated here, Melissa did a great job interviewing him, and there's a lot of substance to his presentation.
Yeah, he's. I think I did. I'm sorry. I don't want to. Well, I don't want to put it right up because if they don't turn it off, we'll all enjoy a good sound. Only I think about that when it's like here. Yeah, I think you did the interview. I ended up talking to him for probably an hour and a half to schedule the interview. He's a very good, personable guy. I will say that. At this point, what we're going to do is switch off our correspondence and bring up a couple people from Value Source because, again, as I promised you, we are going to end with the excitement of technology. So here, I'll take, yeah, that. Thank you. Wonderful. So thank you, Melissa. Ed, I will miss you. And Alan, thank you. Hello, good to see you again. Help me out. I know who you all are, but it's been a year, so. David Fine, and nice to see you, Frank. You know, they have 3 names up here, and I know I would pick the wrong one. You all get that to pass around. So I know we talked a little bit last year, and I love your product, so that part's easy. At least you don't have someone up here, you know, a doubting Thomas. So what is new? What are we doing? What is Value Source doing? You know, we're hearing all about artificial intelligence. How is any of this, you know, what's the next generation and how is some of that going to be incorporated?
Sure. Thanks for having us up here.
You're welcome.
You know, Value Source is always working on things. It was interesting. I saw Tim Urban's keynote, which I found really interesting, really thought-provoking. And I don't think we're going to see a DPU in valuation software anytime soon here. But I think artificial intelligence and algorithms and helping make things easier, helping making analytics easier is definitely things we're working on. We are working on the next generation of tools, and there definitely is some more analytics in there. But one of the things we need to realize is this isn't like the medical profession where we've got, you know, hundreds of thousands of evaluators and, you know, billions of dollars being poured into it. So there is a, you know, in technology, there's definitely a relationship between, you know, how many people are using the software and what kind of relationship you can put into it. And before I came up here, I was doing some reading on, there's a lot of discussion about how AI is going to impact accountants, how it's going to impact the CPA profession, how it's going to impact valuators. There's some interesting stuff in real estate valuations. There is some AI. Freddie Mac is now doing some stuff where they're automating real estate appraisals, and it's a small thing now, but it's growing. I think AI in the valuation space and in value sources world, and you can talk about this too, is more as a tool. In other words, how can we help you get your arms around very complicated kind of things, especially data? When you look at the data you have to analyze, you only have a certain amount of time to work on a case or look at data. How can we help you get your arms around? I think those are the kind of things in the directions that we're moving in to make this stuff, more automated, more standardized, easier to get your arms around. And it's not taking the professional opinion away. What it's doing is giving you the tools, the resources, the data, and the charts, so you can make an opinion faster, would be my take.
Yeah, I would say there's no Zillow for businesses, right? You can't go online and click on it and see the listings of the businesses in the area and what their value is and have that as any kind of a proxy. And I don't think AI will ever get us to that point. I sure hope not. But I think that what I see in the valuation world is really the integration of three different things. One is the data. So your comps, your data, your economic data, all those types of things, your ratios, your analysis, kind of marrying that with the financial analysis that you have, and together with that, with the words from your economic analysis and those other types of things that tend to be repeatable, standard types of information that you have in every report. And so to me, it's the speed of the throughput of being able to pull that stuff together was where I see, I think as Dave aptly said, kind of, it's a tool. It's a tool that you need to use. And so where do you want to spend your time? Do you want to spend your time doing the integration manually? Or do you want to have something that kind of pulls all that together? And that's where I see, the improvement of that throughput as the biggest improvement in the intelligence of the software today.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm looking for is AI that does economic forecasting, because I don't know about you all, but when you tell someone a recession is coming and their numbers are going to go down, nobody ever believes it until when it's history. Then they believe it, which I guess is why the Wall Street economists are always the most surprised about the next recession, right? Doesn't pay well. So maybe AI will help us actually see the next recession. I know that's something I'm always trying to figure out, the assumption that tomorrow is going to be similar to yesterday and maybe even better. Which has not been my experience valuing small businesses at all. So do you have any new products coming out soon, or any new revisions, or are there areas you've been working on specific?
Yeah, for the last probably year, we've been working on the next version of the BVM Pro and Value Source Pro series, and it's interesting because this is our 33rd year, which I find very hard to believe, actually. Our 32nd conference in the BV world. Yeah, so it's been a long time, and many of you people I've gotten to know over the years, which has been great. But one of the things we're working on is chunking things down into modules for since the beginning, since our first spreadsheet in 1985. The expert witness, our stuff has been a single gigantic spreadsheet, but it's gotten too big. So we're breaking it down, we're chunking it down, and we're delivering it in modules, which I think will be great. And we've done a lot of work on that. We're reworking the report writers. We've come out with some new data. Our guideline data set has been replaced by Tagnify, which is awesome. And we're constantly enhancing that stuff. So once again, it's not giant leaps and things, it's small incremental improvements. We're always trying to get things like our analyzers in our Excel workbooks that analyze data to be easier, faster. We're also integrating those into the product. That's actually kind of a nice step. For years, for decades actually, we've provided analytical tools in our web platforms, but not in the product. So we're going to move those into the product. So the workflow, like you say, the workflow is more consistent. So for example, if you do a guideline company analysis, you can actually see that stuff in the software itself instead of just having the summary data. So it'll be more connected, more integrated, more thorough. And with the modules too, I think there's some really exciting potential, because now if you're changing a gigantic spreadsheet, it's hard. But if you're changing a small module for one piece of it, it becomes easy. And I think we're going to have different flavors and be able to add all sorts of value to that.
Yeah, I mean, one module in particular that I really find useful is the discount for lack of marketability module. And there are times when I have an analysis where that's the only module that I use, and I run that module. And it's the Plurus module, and it's nice because everything is there in one place. All the databases are there. Everything you need is in one place, and so I can go and I can run that and just print a quick report on the discount for lack of marketability as it applies to my subject, and it slices and dices it across 5 or 6 different financial metrics, revenue, asset size, returns, etc. And it gives me something that is in just a few minutes very credible, that I can then edit and put into my own words as it relates to the subject itself. Add, do this thing that we don't do very well, which is write. It gives us some basic stuff, but we need to then make it a little more personal. But it gives us that head start and gives us that ability. And that's one of the things that, for example, if you do stuff in front of the Internal Revenue Service, that they're really looking at. Have you really verified? Have you backed up your discount for lack of marketability? Or have you just said, here's all these surveys. The surveys say the discounts are from 10 to 55%, and therefore 20 seems reasonable. That's just not going to cut it if you get audited by the IRS. They want to see something a little more substance there, and that module by itself, and in particular, is one I really like.
Let me just say this too: the Duff and Phelps Navigator obviously is new, and we're working with them to integrate that in the software. That should be coming out in the next 30 to 60 days. So you'll be able to go into the Navigator, click a button, import their spreadsheet that they export, and it'll automatically flow through the model. So a lot of people have been asking about that. Obviously, there's been a lot of software change on the Navigator end, and we've had to sort of, catch up with their changes. So we're working on it.
Oh yeah, I don't need that. I want to talk too. Yeah, the one thing I can tell you, I know I find a framework actually very helpful, because then I can focus on the higher level decisions. Frankly, for me, also having a framework helps make sure I actually do the steps. There are an awful lot of steps sometimes, especially because, again, I'm doing a lot of small businesses, and we kind of go through some of them quickly because there is limited information related to them. But it is important to go through. If I'm giving an opinion, it is important to make sure I have covered every step. And I have documentation, hopefully, in my report and certainly in my files. And I think, again, between having a good base report, and now I've probably got about 10 base reports for different types of things I will do. Having a good base report and having a good framework of these different components that we do need to be reviewing is really helpful for me, because then again, I'm spending my time on, I've got a customer concentration. I've got a government contractor who's got both customer concentration and contract concentration. Well, what is going on here in the business, not just in the numbers. I can spend my time on those questions, instead of spending all my time inputting numbers and inputting boilerplate. So I certainly am a believer in the product. It has helped my practice tremendously. My favorite day with it was when I had 17 Popeyes to value, and it was really nice doing pretty much one report for 17 valuations. We did have to change addresses, and there were variations, but it was really nice to not have to write 17 reports from scratch. So that's been my experience. I would recommend it to anyone. I guess we are nearing conclusion. I may even let you all out a minute or two early. I know that would upset everybody on the last day of conference. I do want to remind you, Around the Valuation World is a monthly show. It's 2 hours, only it's two continuing education credit hours. So we try to keep it at about an hour and 45 minutes, hour and 45 minutes. We cover a variety of topics, some a little differently, but what you've seen here is the type of thing we do. Again, everything from basic valuation theory to things that relate. We had somebody discussing Ponzi schemes, an attorney who has had that as a focus. Some things are a little bit interesting. Maybe we don't run into them every day, but you never know what you're going to encounter, and it might be nice to have a little background and know a resource if it came up. Additionally, as I mentioned before, there is often a lot more detail in the slides if you need a framework, if you need a resource. I do believe, for instance, on the engagement letters, I bounce around to try to see a few of these related to the show. I think he mentioned that he has sample engagement letters, which if you don't have a really good engagement letter you're comfortable with, I would think that would be a good place to start to look at some of those and prepare your own. So around the valuation world, as I said yesterday, we have the Julius Caesar special. I love that name. It's about 25% off. Anyone can watch the show. If you want to get credit, you may want to sign up for the Julius Caesar special and get your discount. So with that, I really want to thank you all. It wouldn't be much of a show without an audience. So I really appreciate your showing up early and your listening. It's been great to all our guests and correspondents who made it. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful conference. We hope to at least see your little names appear on our show, and we hope to see you next year at the next conference. Thank you all.